Alan mentioned Long Barn, and the owner there, Rebecca, told me that there are people who really are, I suppose, aficionados of Vita Sackville West and of Sissinghurst, and they come to that garden and they get so overwhelmed by the beauty because Rebecca puts a very light touch on it. You know, although she gardens in a modern way, she is still holding the structure that she knows is the older structure. And they come there and they get overwhelmed. And she says, we call them our weepers because they come and they weep. This is another one which I love at this time of year. And this is the one that's always wonderful to pronounce, Sarcococca. I can't remember which one this is, but it's got very thin, strappy sort of foliage. I've got another one in the garden which has got more box-like foliage, but I mean there are buds on it, but no fragrance yet. But it is so fragrant in a winter garden. That's my reason for having it, and it's in a place where I brush past it when it's in flower.
They're wonderful, aren't they? And you're right, in terms of in a small garden, that is one good thing. You do have more opportunity to get up close and personal with some of these scented plants and put them in places. It's like I've said before that I put scented daffodils, normally, I might not this year, but either side of the front door. So when I reach out to get the milk bottle at that time of year, I get the
waft of lovely. Yeah. Well, this one, why I say I definitely brush past it is because it does tend to go over the path quite a lot, so it makes sure that I do brush past it.
Well, that's what happens when you have a smaller garden. It must do, because having had a bigger garden, you must want to grow so many plants, and it's just impossible not to come slightly over the path at least. And it's not so bad when it's your own garden and you can do exactly what you like, but sometimes if you open your garden to the public like we do, we have to be probably a little bit more careful with overhanging plants.
Exactly.
Trip hazards and things like that,
Definitely. Health and safety raises its head. If you can't have people falling into the borders.
No.
We always had this in my mum's garden, that we had a rose that my dad had built this sort of fence halfway across the garden to divide it, and we had this rose growing up that got wonderfully gnarled, but it got accidentally left to sort of grow a bit low, and it became a great big sort of trunk of rose. So we would all just duck underneath it, but then anyone would come to the garden and suddenly they'd be following behind you. Clonk. Oh yeah, sorry.
Forgot
to tell you about the misplaced rose.
I remember years and years ago, I used to help a lady called Mrs. Logan in her garden. She was frightfully posh, and she always had scarlet nail varnish, I remember, and smoked like a trooper. But she had roses, and they had such thick stems at the base. They were like trees.
Yes.
And if you go to an old rose garden, you actually see they have so much character when they get like that.
Yes,
they're like an old gnarled pelargonium in a pot, which some people would look at and say, gosh, that's an ugly old thing. But I love it. I just think it's character.
Definitely. And you go into some of these old, there's a place near me where I think they've got plants like that they've been in the family, that sort of get nurtured by successive generations. And they're just wonderful, as you say, some character. Yeah. Well, I couldn't really do a show and tell without herbs, as you know. Herbs are my thing. So this rosemary hasn't got any flower on it at the moment, but it's a white flowered rosemary.
Oh, very smart.
So it's and of course I'm so fed up that rosemary is now called
Salvia.
Salvia rosmarinifolia. Alba, just for its variety, but it is beautiful. It just has these little knots of white flowers. And of course, the leaves have just got that absolutely crushable, lovable, touchable. Yeah. Oh. Your nose.
I love rosemaries. I really do.
And here I've got one that I got from a long time ago from a couple who were herb growers here, Caroline and John, who had a nursery called Suffolk Herbs. And that was in a village nearby or a part of, not really a village, it was a hamlet called Cornard here. and they had one called Sudbury Blue, which they had raised on their, as a sport on their nursery. So I've got Sudbury Blue, and it's a very, very lovely blue rosemary.
I'll swap you a cutting.
Okay.
You have that wonderful cascading rosemary. Is it Foxtail?
Yes, it is Foxtail. You're absolutely right. But now I've heard, I'm going to ask Barbara this because she's an expert on herbs. And I have heard, and I have seen somewhere in Cornwall, a manor house with a retaining wall either side of the path that leads to the front door. And on one side facing south, they had this rosemary, and it just cascades completely straight down. And somebody else mentioned it to me, a herb grower in the garden during the summer. Now, I don't know whether you know which variety of rosemary it would be that absolutely just
goes straight down.
I mean, is it a form of Prostratus or something like that?
A form of Prostratus. There are lots of prostrate forms. And I saw a similar thing in America. I've got a photograph of myself next to this wall, which is just, covered in rosemary just trailing down. It's absolutely beautiful. So go for it.
I'm going to.
I'm trying to think. Jekka McVicker has got a lovely prostrate one. I can't remember its name.
Did you know she was the first woman to play at Glastonbury?
I did, yes. I remember.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
In a band who was a very strange name. I can't remember the band's name.
I don't think I ever knew what it was called.
I think I've seen it written somewhere. Yes, no, that's definitely one to try.
I would like to explore herbs. I don't want all of them because many of them, I mean, my herbs would be mainly culinary, I have to say.
Yes.
I don't necessarily want the medicinal things. But I mean, the problem with the first herb gardens, they need managing. Otherwise, they can look very scrappy, I find. And I don't know. I remember seeing two wonderful big obelisks of the golden hop, and I think it was it's Bess of Hardwick's house.
Yes.
Can't remember the name of that now, but anyway, it doesn't matter. But they were just sort of kind of going over, and they kind of looked a bit scrappy, and all the various herbs had gone to seed and things. So my herb garden has to be a kind of herb garden, but with, I think probably I put lots of salvias in it, in actual fact. But as well as that, you need some leaf structure, don't you? Some nice big leaves and some spiky bits and sharp bits and thorny bits. And
you also want to have the evergreens because you want that.
Yes.
The bay and rosemary for that as well.
I'll tell you one thing I have got, and this is inspired by a plant that grows near your mum's house, Thordies, because I used to drive in and out of Norwich, and you'd be in the middle of winter, you'd look up and there'd be this wonderful golden tree. And I thought, what on earth is that? And it turned out to be a golden bay. And bay, they gold up, if you like, in the winter, and they do look absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
So I bought one, and mine wouldn't gold up. It just wouldn't. It refused to completely until it got to maybe 9 or 10 feet tall. And then with its head was up there, it did it.
Absolutely.
But it's a lovely winter plant.
It is. I had one in the old garden and it did exactly that. It just was sort of, feeble and green below. And then suddenly there'd be this whoosh of color.
Yeah.
So I've got one in a pot in the garden now. And it will be some time before it holds up. But yes, I didn't want to be without it, so I've got it that way.
Yeah.
I think I need to reinvigorate what is actually a childhood love of herbs. My mum had a herb book when I was little, and I always say I got into gardening in my 20s, but the more I think back to my childhood when my mum was taking hebe cuttings and fuchsia cuttings and had like a few gardening books, lots of the Hussein gardening manuals and things, but I was absolutely obsessed with her herb book. And it was you just saying about you didn't want the medicinal ones. The idea that you could eat all these things like nasturtiums and that various things had medicinal qualities, I just couldn't get enough of it. And I don't know, I've put that in some sort of childhood box in my brain, and I think it needs to come back out at some point.
Definitely come up. Yes. No, it's fascinating when you start using them. And I agree with you, Alan, about the sort of structural element that they're not. I don't want to have a garden in this small garden, I can't have a box parterre and have herbs within that. So my herbs are all integrated in the garden. So I don't really notice their winter disappearance, as it were, because they've got other things around them. So I'm sort of happy about that. But then I've got a lot of tender people, or ones that I don't think are going to survive so well outside, which I've got in the greenhouse. And one of those is this wonderful creature, which is Chervil, which is just my favorite. Well, one of my favorites. They're all my favorites. It's got aniseed flavor to the leaves, and chopped up in omelets and served with fish or anything like that. It's really beautiful. And the other one that's in the greenhouse at the moment, and coriander, which I never used to like coriander.
You talk to various people, and coriander does seem to be the herb that's most like Marmite, really. You either like it or you hate it.
Yeah, and they say that some people have got a sort of genetic what's the word, dislike of it, and just feel absolutely ill, and that it's soapy in the mouth and all of that. But I think I just had not had proper experience of it when I was younger. And then suddenly, it's my favorite.
I love it. A nice coriander guacamole.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
I could eat that right now.
Well, I think it's a bit...
We got 10 minutes.
Well, I'm going to just show you the last little herb that I've got. I've got two other plants, but the herb, this is the same plant. I don't know if you can see. So this is a basil, and it's a perennial basil called Basilicum Ocimum African Blue. And you can see why it's called that, because it's got these wonderful purpley blue veins. This is a cutting that has rooted. I just root them in water. And the plant that I showed you, it's come in from the greenhouse, and I think I'll keep this one indoors, because the greenhouse, although it's slightly heated, it's just takes the frost off it. It doesn't look incredibly happy, but it is a perennial. And so if I can keep it going over the winter, which I do most years, I've then got basil all through the winter and into the springtime before I start sowing the new annual basils.
But the annual basil, I mean, even last summer, it was fabulous here.
Yeah.
But unless you get a really lovely summer, it doesn't like the English climate very much, does it?
No, I mean, it just needs that heat. And of course, it often gets overwatered.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I did grow a lot outdoors this year because it was such a wonderful hot summer.
I remember doing a television program about courtyard gardens in Spain. And the courtyard gardens in Spain had three things in common. One was old-fashioned pelargoniums, or geraniums, as my grandmother used to call them, and they were grown in sort of empty soup tins and things like that.
Absolutely.
Minus the labels, of course. They had a pot of basil, and there was always a bowl of water or a little water playing somewhere. Those three things, there were just a theme that ran through them. But the basil, you could just touch the basil, and the warm air, the scent is
That's the thing about herbs. That they will have and do have, many of them, wonderful medicinal qualities, but it's that quality of just aroma, really, that lifts your senses.
Like walking on pennyroyal on a path or something, because that lovely sort of minty tang.
Yes. Wouldn't it be nice to sort of do that, what you've just done about the three elements, sort of go into any garden and sort of see what its three unique selling points were?
There's a book for you, Barbara.
I can say in your
three is my lucky number. There's the title.
In your garden, we wouldn't be able to do that because there's too many plants. 333 more like. The great thing about, you're saying about things having to be beautiful and useful. I mean, herbs great for putting into arrangements as well. Not necessarily all of them, but lots of them. And Bridget Girling, who's featured on this podcast before, a good friend of mine, amazing floral artist, really. She was telling me earlier this year she uses a lot of purple basil. And it cuts really well, and it goes really nicely into arrangements, I think, in flower. predominantly. So that was something she'd
Yes.
been using. The other thing is, I was just, if anyone saw me looking down, I was looking at my phone because rooting in water is something we talked about from with Mike.
Are we boring you, darling?
Yeah, I'm just down here on Insta, you know.
Yeah.
But I wanted to find who'd written a comment on this video. Mike Clifford of Mike's Rare Plants appeared, I think it was possibly episode 93 or something like that. And he was talking about how quite often now he roots into a mixture of perlite and sphagnum moss to kind of save space but have more success. And Julie had commented that she does root quite a lot of things in water, but she pots them up into her medium of choice just when the root nubs appear, rather than letting them get a great big mass of roots, which I suppose is the temptation. And I just wanted to share that in case, in case it worked for other people, because Julie very kindly took the time to write the comment on our video. And it's certainly something I'm going to try. I can't remember in the past whether or not I've seen any particular different level of success from hardly any root to lots of root, but I'm certainly going to pay more attention going forward.
I think Mike's tip was, in actual fact, to use a plastic clear cup, and you pierce the edges and you filled it full of sphagnum moss, and then you wrap that around your stem that you wanted to root. And then you planted the root and the sphagnum moss in soil. So the transference from a rooting medium to soil is not, I mean, water just dissipates, drains away, leaving these fragile roots, and they've got to start again, really.
Yes, I guess so.
I thought that was a good wheeze, actually.
Yeah. But for those things which do root very easily in water, and so you kind of want to shove them all into, this is what I do in my tiny kitchen. So I have a milk bottle with loads and loads of different things in it. The things I know will successfully, transition into soil quite easily. But I will now be starting to transition them earlier. So
yes, well, I'm wondering actually if that might be the reason why some of my basil cuttings have failed. But I think it's possibly because I did them too late. Not cuttings. I suppose they are cuttings, aren't they? The rooted cuttings. I may have done them a bit too late, so that when I put them into the greenhouse, it was a colder shock because they'd been in the house. And then they got out into that unfriendly environment out there.
Well, I'm delighted you brought lots of herbs along. We would have been disappointed if you hadn't demonstrated your love of the herbs or the people. Herbs people in your garden.
Yes, definitely. So you can see that I'll be having an omelette for lunch.
Well, at least we can feel like we were part of the harvesting process.
That's right. You've got the guacamole, the coriander guacamole, and I've got the omelette. What are you having, Alan?
I have no idea until I open the fridge and look, to be quite honest.
Now, you said you had a couple of other things secreted around your laptop.
Yes, may I show you? Well, this is one that just gives so much joy. And I know it's a very common house plant that everybody has. But look at the flowering on that.
I think that's fantastic.
Isn't that amazing? And
it's such a lovely colour too.
I know. And it starts off whitish.
Yeah.
And sort of, as it were, ripens to this pretty magenta, pale pink. And I say to people, I'm not really an indoor house plant person. And yet this thing has been with me, I think, for about 10 years. And I just water it, and then I take the dead flowers off. But what I can't get over is that each of the leaves is budding, right back on the stem. It's just prolific.
Have you had it long enough that you don't know its variety?
Oh, well, Schlumberger, probably garden centre-ish. Yeah, I don't know its variety. And
I think it's garden centre-ish-y.
Yeah, probably. But, or garden centre wonderful-ish.
Yeah.
But no, I'm thrilled with it. And I can, as I sit here, I can see where I can take a few bent flowers off and do a little bit of tidying up. And it just it's been flowering, I think, probably for about 4 weeks, and no sign of stopping. So what a amazing sort of thing.
I think isn't that the kind of thing that we want, though? This, especially during the dark months of the year. You don't necessarily want to venture into the garden every day. You we get out and we tend the greenhouse. I go to the potting shed and I'm still potting up bulbs. I've got some muscari this afternoon that I'm going to be potting up.
Wonderful.
They're now called something else, I think. Again, it's this wretched botanist thing with name changes.
Yes.
It used to be paradoxum, but it's not muscari now. It's gone into some Belvillia, I think.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I know. It's just so confusing.
Woe betide the collection holders.
Yes.
Richard Hobbs is going to have to get bigger labels.
Yes, exactly. All those labels that.
Yeah.
And what about? I mean, the bane of my life is finding something that will stay on a label. To what you write with will stay on a label, because I do try to label things, and then within a year there's no name on the plant on the label because it's washed off.
Well, it is. I find a reasonably soft lead pencil works as well as anything, really.
Yeah.
But I have now got a new, I can't remember the name of it, but a new permanent marker, which so far has done very, very well. But I suspect by the way that sometimes when I try and write on anything damp, it won't work. I think, I don't know, this is going to be a failure. I think maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, well, if it succeeds, let me know.
Well, there are those wonderful things you can get, the little machines where you dial each letter and then stamp it. But that is such a bore.
I don't know. I don't think it would work with you.
No.
So more and more people get the little machines and print the label out. But yeah, I can't really see Alan doing that in the potting shed.
No.
Not going to take on.
My last little person here, Alan, you will remember. This is. Yes. I have always had beautiful Mauna Loas from you, and the last one I had just sort of grew and grew and grew and had an amazingly long stem, and then it fell over one day.
Yeah,
and this is grown from. I cut back the stem, and this is what's grown from that one stem.
Oh, that's marvelous!
Isn't that wonderful? I'm so.
And she has just erupted, has she not?
Yes. Yes,
the volcano that she's named after.
Yes, exactly. I shall show her on the news if I can find it. Look.
A fabulous final piece of show and tell with an East Ruston connection. I'm wondering how it is that I've never walked away from Alan's with a Mauna Loa. Actually, I clearly need to amend this.
Oh, I've often sent the money along with friends and very kindly allowed them to take it away from me.
I'm surprised you ever got it. If I was that friend, I'd have given you the money and kept the plant.
Yeah, kept the plant. Yeah. Well, thank you. And now I know that.
Yeah, never send me to get you plants. I just buy two. Then we've both got one. We're all right. Now, ever since you said that this small garden leaves you with a lot of FLOMO, I've been very excited about the FLOMO section of this podcast. So for anyone who's tuning in for their first ever Talking Dirty, FLOMO is the way Alan and I live our lives. It's that sort of fear of missing out we get about a flower or a plant. Even with 32 acres, Alan has this feeling. I have a tiny suburban garden, so I'm with you, Barbara.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not just specific plants, so there are plenty of those. Going through your book, just in case anyone's forgotten we were talking about that, Secret Gardens of the Southeast, available from all the bookshops. But it was it Boyton Court in Maidstone? They have this huge drift of pulsatillas. Now, I love a pulsatilla, and I've not, until this year, I'd not planted one in the garden, and it might have been a trip to a garden. I wanted to buy something to remember it. I think it might have been Marjorie Fisher's garden. So I just bought a pulsatilla because I thought, well, there we go. There's something I really want. So I've got one, and I have no idea whether it's going to have survived or not. But this drift of seed heads, it wasn't even the flowers, it wasn't the little bells.
No,
it was just like some sort of fluffy creature hunkered down on the ground.
Yes, that's a lovely way of describing it.
I just thought I need a drift of pulsatillas. Probably not in this garden, if we're honest, unless this seeds very, very enthusiastically in the front, very small front garden. Yes. But that was the plant, but more just the use of it, that idea of a drift. You don't see pulsatillas en masse very often.
No, I can't do drifts here, unfortunately. No. Alan, you can.
Yes, I can. In actual fact, it's just given me an idea because we've been we've moved. Well, I refer to it as a compost heap, but over the years it's just become a very, very large heap of soil. And we used to refer to it as the Matterhorn because it got ever more difficult to get up the thing. And so we bit the bullet and we've had it moved, and we've enlarged the desert wash, as it were. And the bund that we've made, the heap of soil that we've made on the south side of it, I want to take away from the desert plants more. Well, it could be almost be alpine-ish in a way.
Yes.
But that is a place that I could do. And I would have a feeling that I would have to do I don't know the name of it, but there's a red Pulsatilla.
Yes.
Quite a dark red one, and there's a white one. And I think the two would look wonderful together.
Yes.
Don't say blood and bandages, please.
Never thought of that.
I actually saw, and it might need more moisture than it would get in your garden, but there's a fantastic, talking of alpine plants, there's a fantastic Instagram account, Bulbamads, who I think is based in South Africa and posts the most amazing South African flora. And it was a Tulbaghia called Montana, I think, which it was almost like, it wasn't your standard Tulbaghia at all. It was like tiny little daffodils, like white outer petals with a tiny little orange corona almost. Yeah. And I think they'd had some difficulty with it not getting enough moisture, and they were worried they'd lost it, and they hadn't. But it's I couldn't believe it was just such a beautiful, delicate little flower. And you said alpines, and then I immediately got excited because I can't have it. I have nowhere that I can put this.
No, well, I come back from places, and and there's inevitably there are plants in the boot, and I think, well, where am I going to put this? But the thought of saying no doesn't occur to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I end up with, you don't want things in a holding pen for too long, but this summer was a disaster because I couldn't plant things, it was too dry, so I've still basically got a holding pen like down the side of my house.
Oh yes, no, I've had that, but it's this year everything is planted, which is wonderful. But my main the thing that I sort of feel is I have got a lot of trees in the garden. I've got the malus, and I've got an upright growing liquidambar, which is really beautiful, from Simpson's in Cambridgeshire. Lovely, and this year it's put on its colour beautifully. So there are little trees in the garden, but of course, as you said earlier, I've got to think about how they're going to be. So the upright and the little spreader at the back. But the one that I really, really would love to have is a Parrotia, because of its wonderful autumn colour and the kind of bark and the little flowers.
Tiny red flowers, yeah.
Yes, tiny flowers. And, I know that that's going to need so much space to be wonderful.
I love Parrotias.
Yeah. So I just think I have to go to somewhere, an arboretum, and see them. Rather than have one in my garden.
Well, you could take the kind of philosophical attitude that Fergus Garrett has taken to the exotic garden at Dixter, where he's included some various conifers, and one of them is the weeping blue cedar. I think it's not. Anyway, it's a weeping blue conifer, and his attitude is that when they get too big, he will remove them.
Yes.
He didn't say what he'd do with them, but I mean,
he has got the space for it to go elsewhere.
Yeah, possibly. But I did think, natural fact, you pay 50 quid for a plant, shall we say, and you obviously don't want to lose it. But if you have it for 10 years, that's 5 quid a year.
That's true. Yes,
that's very reasonably priced.
Reasonable.
Yes.
I feel like it was a long time ago on this podcast. I've been looking through a magazine, and I think there was a Smart Garden in a sort of Gardens Illustrated type magazine that I'm sure they topiarized a Parrotia, and they'd sort of somehow contained it into some little fat. They weren't quite balls; they were maybe more like tires, really. But then it got all that fabulous balls, tires,
a tier of tires.
I think it was a Parrotia, and I mean, I have no idea. I'm not a topiary person. I'd love to be, but I've not yet delved into that at all. So I don't know how you do it, but maybe you can really curtail it. And
yes. Honey, I shrunk the Parrotia.
And if you work out how to do it, tell me, because I want one.
Well, I let you into a secret. When we first had the garden here, which was about 2 acres, we did plant a Parrotia. And of course, it did grow too big and we had to take it out. But the moment we bought extra land, that was one of the trees that we wanted to grow. And we have now got Parrotias on the East Park, and they are, I mean, they just look stunning in the winter. But you do need that lovely setting. I mean, there's some wonderful ones at Sheffield Park, I think it is, isn't it?
Yes. It's at this time of year, or just a little bit prior to this, when they're at their best, aren't they? Just so beautiful.
Yes, absolutely fantastic. But you do need space for them, I'm afraid. As you do lots of trees, including your Liquidambar. I mean, that was a very clever idea to get a fastigiate form.
Yeah.
Is that Slender Silhouette?
Well, I think the other thing is it's worth mentioning the fact that if you do have a small garden and you want to grow a tree, lots and lots of trees do have fastigiate forms.
That's
right.
right.
Some are better than others, but I mean, I would never, for instance, I would never use the fastigiate form of that flowering cherry because bits fall out of it and it looks a mess.
No,
but lots of them are well worth growing. So you can have 2 or 3. Did you like that?
Yes, yes. Have we had 1 or 2 martinis too many?
I don't drink martini, no.
This podcast always has this effect. You end up giddy on plant joy or something.
Definitely.
A fine flomo, Barbara. Though I'm impressed by that. Alan, where are you at with your flomo this week?
Well, I'm obviously my flomo is going to be getting in touch with Jackie McVicker from her herb nursery to see if I can find the rosemary that hangs like vertical cat's tails, because that is something I really would like to do. And I wrote down actually herb pennyroyal because I don't have it. And I suddenly thought, well, and you start to get a kind of a picture emerging. I don't know where this is going to go, but you get a picture emerging in your mind. There could be a few old coppers, and various other sort of like galvanized tubs or something like that, which you could actually, where you could make a herb garden. And I think it would be rather lovely to do that. And then all you need is a seat in the middle of it so that you can sit down. The moment you sit down, you'll say, oh, there's a weed over there. I must get up and pull that out.
But it's always nice to have the thought that you might sit down.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Just think about it. Don't actually do it. I was just Googling the prostrate rosemaries, and I think they just now call them a group with lots of different ones clumped together. But there is one that I think begins with a B, like Beaulieu, something like that, which Jekka had at one time. And then there's one that they call Prostratus, which that seems to be very unimaginative to call it that.
Yeah. Well, some people are.
Well, I always like the idea off the back of one of these podcasts that we might go to East Ruston and see the idea that we've seen form in Alan's head actually come to fruition before our very eyes when we're actually there walking around the acres of East Ruston. So fingers crossed it comes to real life. You just need to find the rosemary. That's
right. And you talked earlier about secret gardens, and I have a friend who hasn't yet been to East Ruston. So East Ruston is still secret to them.
Oh. Yes, I know. Do you know, I did a podcast edition of BBC Radio 4 Gardeners Question Time that went out last week. And I actually had an email, believe it or not, from California. And the email came from a chap in California who is hosting a lady who lives in Reefham in Norfolk and who had never been to East Ruston before. So you see, we are still a little bit off the radar.
Exactly.
That's what happens when you're nearly in the sea.
Yes, it does. That cold old North Sea.
Mind you, it's well worth the pilgrimage. At least when people get to you, they know it was well worth the traipse across to the furthest.
I remember the day that Val Bourne came a couple of years ago, She came in August and she said, this must be the coldest August day I've ever lived through. And it was a bitterly cold August day. I don't know why, but it was.
Do you know, Barbara, I knew this was going to be fun. I knew we were going to have a wonderful time. But it's been absolutely lovely. What a fabulous way to spend an hour. Will you please come back when your garden is less frozen?
Oh, please, if you'll have me, I'd love
to. Undoubtedly with some other fabulous book to talk about as well, because you are always very industrious at penning these lovely horticultural tomes. So
there's a blank mind at the moment, so I haven't got any ideas, except 3 is my lucky number.
Yeah. Well, a bit like seeing Alan's ideas come to fruition at East Ruston. When we see that on the bookshelves, we'll know it all started here.
You'll be in the acknowledgements.
I look forward to it. Until we meet again on Talking Dirty, thank you very much for coming along and inspiring us. Everyone needs to go and get The Secret Gardens of the South East. Alan's going to hold his copy up as well.
Well,
I'll reach my copy.
Dare I say it's never too late to buy your loved one a present. Exactly. And this is absolutely ideal.
And if it go, woo, I managed to get there.
And if you got given some vouchers for Christmas, you don't know what to spend them on. There we go.
That's a good thing, yes. And the thing is, even if it is after Christmas, it's start of the garden visiting spring urge.
Absolutely.
So, the spring urge. I love it.
Get The Secret Gardens of the Southeast and plan your holiday route. You won't be using too many air miles or anything like that, so you're going to be doing good. And if you can cycle when you get there, it's even better.
Exactly.
And you'll get fit. Until next time, Barbara, thank you so much and happy gardening.
Thank you.
Happy gardening, everybody.
Well, Alan, you're looking beautifully well lit and everything. This is a top spot.
Well, I'm facing a window, you see.
Yeah,
I've got another window on my left, so I'm lit from both sides. Mr. DeMille taught me this trick.
I hope you don't overheat. You've got the fire and about 4 layers, I think. So
I've got 2 vests on, the long sleeve one and a short sleeve one, and then this thick jumper.
Trying to think of the arboretum that's in is it Winkworth? In the west, sort of Cotswolds, possibly. Anyway, it's gone from me. That's my problem at the moment, is that names can just slip easily out of my brain.
Oh, that happens to me all the time.
So young.
It started early.
Oh, no.
I think Alan's Googling. Are you Googling, Alan?
Well, I was going to, but
yeah, you found
I got suddenly loads of messages coming up, so I thought, no, put it away.
Well,
Are we boring you?
Touché, madame.
The young person is on his phone again.